And hey, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Unlocking Excellence with your main man, Coach Eric Schwefel. What's going on, everyone? I hope that you're having a great day. I am, and I'm so excited about what we're going to bring today, y'all. I have a very special guest for you. His name is Mr. Loudermilk, and Derek and I, this is our first conversation that we're having, but there's been times in the past where we've connected before. So it seems like years ago, we did something called the School of Greatness with Lewis Howes. It was a way to start to develop our message. And over time, Derek has really, you've exploded, man. 300 episodes plus in the podcast over 6 years. You've got 2 kids now. You're married. You're a cyclist. You got the championship this round. And I'm really excited to explore. Derek, what's going on, man? Welcome to the podcast.
Eric, thanks for having me. I love your energy. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be really great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Derek, tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to the audience, and what do you feel like we need to know?
Well, that's a great introduction already. I would say, maybe a context was that as a kid, I was one of these kids that just wanted to be an explorer. Like, my heroes were everything from astronauts to, Ernest Shackleton, the polar explorers. And so, backyard adventures became Boy Scout adventures, became like trying to have a career as a professional cyclist. And then I pivoted and then tried to be a scientific explorer. And now, so I'm always trying to weave this adventurous theme into my career. And now, I had a podcast called The Art of Adventure, where I was exploring adventure kind of on an academic level, but also going out there and experiencing as many different adventures as I could. For years, I traveled the world for the last 6 years. And so the way that we reconnected was, right, I'm changing the podcast name from The Art of Adventure to my name, The Derek Loudermilk Show, right, just to expand. I feel like I've looked at adventure from so many different angles. Now I want the opportunity to sort of expand that. But that's what brings us up to today is all these twists and turns, trying to have an adventurous life.
I love that. And I saw that transition. That's how we really reconnected. You were asking about podcast art and I got to vote there. And then this happened very quickly. Our interview happened very quickly, which is just, I find quite amazing. So I'm very thankful that you took the time to be here. If you don't mind, I'd love to focus on the podcast and then the lessons that I say we, but we're going to learn as you tell us. So it was The Art of Adventure. Now it's turning into the Derek Loudermilk Show. And I love that idea of adventure. So how did it get started? Who were you back then? What did you want to get out of it? And how have, you grown during that time? That's a loaded question, but
yeah, and Lewis Howes, whose School of Greatness we were in, I saw him doing his podcast. I think he launched just a few months before I did, and he was already successful with it. And I was like, oh, a get rich quick idea. It's going to be great. I'm going to be a millionaire through podcasting. Well, it turns out podcasting is you give it away for free. So it's not necessarily your path to riches. But I had this question in my mind of these people who are professional adventurers, that they're being paid to go on expeditions, whether it's sports or extreme sports or science or whatever it was. Like, how are they building this career? How are people traveling for years on end? Like, how do they fund it? And so I had this was kind of back before digital nomads was really a term even. Yeah. And so it was this just new thing I was just trying to figure out. And I thought I'd have a podcast and sort of learn out loud, learn and share that with people as I was learning. So I was interviewing people who had businesses that they were running from other parts of the world that, they were moving around, and I started to realize there's a whole scene, a whole community around digital nomadism on one hand. But then you have these people that have been traveling and adventuring since before there was the internet. Right. These are the old school people that did it differently.
OGs, yeah.
And so this is just, it's this, and obviously, travel is tourism is huge in the world in terms of part of economies, but
right.
It was pretty new to me to see how many people made adventure their lifestyle and to really try to understand how they could do it.
So it wasn't just this, because I've always been interested in that same thing, right? But I haven't really dove deep, I guess is the right way to put it, until just recently, matter of fact, the online coaching world and what can be possible from your laptop. So this is something that you started exploring years ago. And really it was kind of at the beginning, on the precipice of this whole digital movement, like you said, the digital nomads. So like, how did you go about finding these people, interviewing them? Was it as simple as just contacting them and setting up a conversation, or how did that happen?
Yeah, a lot of I quickly learned one of the superpowers to being a podcaster is that you have access that you normally maybe wouldn't have. Like, you have an excuse to talk to people that are, by all other aspects, they're like way ahead of you in your career, or they're more successful by some measure.
Right.
And yet they'll take, some of these people who had founded, billion-dollar companies or actual billionaires, and part of it was the name. I had two people say, I only agreed to come on your show because it was about adventure and I love adventure. And it was like, cool, that's awesome. Like this guy, Jim Rogers, he's largely considered, him and Warren Buffett are largely considered, like the best investors of the last century. And wow. Yeah, I sent him an email. He's like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll come on your show. And I was like, you're kidding. So this is the guy, Jim Rogers, if you don't know who he is, he's really fascinating. He made a couple $1 million on Wall Street. Right. Then he took that couple million and took a motorcycle trip around the world, visited 130 countries over 3 years, invested that 2 million along the way, and turned it into 30 million. So
wow.
It was really cool. He was like the first guy to invest in some countries. Like, they just opened their stock market. He happened to be there, and they had like 7 stocks on the stock exchange in Botswana or something. And he's like, I guess I'll just buy all of them. So he was like the first investor in some of these places. And so then he did it again a couple decades later, where he drove around with his girlfriend. He had this like mix between a Jeep and a Mercedes convertible. It was this bright yellow like thing. Right. He did it again. He took that 30 million, drove around the world, invested again, and turned that into 300 million or 400 million. So he's, just this fascinating guy. And then to have him just say like, yeah, I want to talk to you. I want to go on your podcast. That's super cool, that access. And when I think about abundance, and a lot of times what I'm wanting is to have experiences. Yeah. And like, if I had $1 million, I'd buy this experience. Well, I can shortcut that by just going and having that experience. I can go and talk to these amazing people, or I can go spend time in this place without having to set it all up. I just go and do it.
What a way to live vicariously through others. And what a way to learn. That is, when I was growing up, one of the strongest lessons that I learned, and I'm sure if we dove deep into it, I could tell you who it was, but it was to live vicariously through others, to ask questions, to hear their stories. And it's the way that we've communicated throughout all of time, right? Is storytelling and communicating with one another. That is an awesome lesson. Thank you. And what a guy Jim Rogers, was that his?
Yeah, Jim Rogers. He's on TV. So you'll be able to find him, whoever's listening.
Oh yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because that's an amazing story. You go out into the world, you get to experience, and then look at the abundance that's come with that. So while we're on that topic real quick, right? Abundance. We were talking just a few minutes ago about abundance and how that relates to confidence. Would you mind exploring that a little bit more for us?
Well, I think, where I have a unique position is that most people equate money with abundance.
Yes.
And it's just a small piece of what abundance really is. And so abundance, let's define it as being able to do what you need to do when you need to do it, or do what you want when you want to do it.
Yes. Okay.
And so there's a lot more that goes in. There's opportunity. There's you could just change. You could just exchange with somebody. You could trade. You could. Let's see. I was just thinking about this the other day. I mean, there's good luck, right?
Right.
There's being in the right place at the right time. There's good ideas. There's the ability to be resourceful. There's all these things that go into actually being able to do what you need to do when you need to do it, that go beyond just money. But we're so focused on getting money because we believe that's the ticket to abundance. But when you expand this and you see money is maybe like 20% of the equation or something like that, it allows you to pursue these other avenues of abundance.
Right.
Like, who knew that creativity is just as valuable as money? Because if you can come up with the right, maybe you can piece together, maybe it takes a little money, a little ingenuity, the right connections, and a good luck, then you're off to the races.
Yeah.
So I think, perhaps one of the most powerful things is just reframing exactly what abundance is for each person.
Yes. And I really like that idea. I really like that idea, because money tends to be, for most, or in some cases, is money is the outcome. It's not necessarily, it's the end all, it's the result. So there's a formula that needs to take place before that. And most people think it's just, I have this one thing and this is how it happens, but there's so many other layers that go along with that. What have you learned are those layers and some of the key aspects in abundance? So we have defining abundance. That's going to be a huge, huge piece of it, right? Because you got to know what it is in order to have it. And then what else you got?
Yeah. So as I've met all these adventurers and I study them, what do they have in common? What do they do that allows them to be successful in setting a world record or world's first, trip across the Antarctic or something like that? What is it? What are their characteristics that they have? And they have this sort of very broad and robust confidence. And there's some different elements of that. There's the ability to learn something quickly. So let's define confidence as you believe you'll be able to show up and do a good job.
Yeah.
Which is very close to doing what you need to do when you need to do it.
Right.
So there's a connection there. So some of these aspects that these adventurers seem to have, and I believe that adventurers, they seem to be the most confident people that I've encountered, because they're dealing with so many different things. So they have this adaptability in terms of how quickly they can learn a new skill or thrive in a new situation.
Right.
They have the ability to connect with people. So they also have confidence in their relationship, so they can ask for help if they need to, even if they don't speak the language, if they're in a new country and, maybe they put aside their fear of these, tribesmen with bones in their face to actually connect with people. Wow. So there's confidence in the skill acquisition, confidence in the relationship, the confidence in their physical ability.
Yeah.
And it's their, both their strength and their sort of, physical prowess. So there's a health aspect as well, but there's like a grit. Yeah. There's a I've been through challenging situations and I know I have the stamina or the determination to go through a period of discomfort.
Yeah.
So there's that piece as well. I'm trying to think.
Battle tested, like they would I'm thinking of different people. So as you say this, right, I have different images of people who have come up in my mind. And if you were dropped in the middle of an unknown place, certain people might react as scared. They might react as, very worrisome and not knowing what to do. But just knowing that you have the ability to move and to the capability to do something is a great prerequisite for an adventurer, because it's about the outcome and the purpose, not necessarily getting caught up in the details of what needs to happen or how it's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, think of that guy who cut his arm off to get out of the rock. He was like, none of the other plans that I had to get out of here alive are working. I'm just going to have to go with this plan. And that's a pretty extreme thing, but there's lesser versions of that where you're like, nothing's going the way I thought it was, but I have to still create a workable solution. So there's also this, we see this in entrepreneurs as well, but this ability to sort of take action, maybe even without a plan, or having a bias towards taking action.
Yeah.
There's, there's my favorite scene in Indiana Jones. He's got to go stop the Nazis from doing something. And he's like running across this airstrip and the woman's like, Indy, what's your plan? He's like, I don't have one. And he's just like sprinting full speed. He's like gonna just like who knows, right?
It out as it happens. Like
what's that?
You build your parachute on the way down. You take the leap and then you build the parachute, and you make sure that you figure out how to land on the way down. I mean, I get that. It works too, you know. It forces you out of that analysis paralysis stage.
Yeah. So I mean, we can. It's great to sort of idealize, like, you know, taking the leap and building it on the way down, but when you have gone through a lot of these things, it gives you the confidence. Like you may have done something successful in a bunch of other realms.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're faced with a new situation, and sort of, you know, I used to refer to this as like domain specific. Like, I'm really confident that I'm good at chess, but I'm not confident that I'm going to be good giving a toast at a wedding, right? Because they're totally different domains, different settings. Right. But as you develop sort of this generalized confidence through these, and what I really like is that each of these are a trainable component. You can actually work and improve each of these parts as a skill.
Yeah.
Which means it's accessible to everybody, which is great. Then you can be dropped into these brand new situations that you've never done and still feel confident that you'll be able to show up and do a good job. Yeah.
That's pretty cool how everything kind of spills over. So some of the things that we have to recap, because that was a good bit right there. It's define your abundance. It's having, for the adventurer, some of those qualities are, I'm trying to look for the right words, but it's to have the ability to have the confidence in order to get things done, to be able to talk to different people, be able to ask for help, to communicate how they need that help. And then what we kind of just hit right here too is knowing that other skills can transfer over to current situations or to unlikely scenarios and circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah. And so let's take, the ability to connect with people and sort of build connection and rapport with brand new people. That in and of itself is a skill that you could go out and you could work on, body language. You could work on understanding, sort of how our subconscious mind connects to somebody else's subconscious, like how somebody feels safe around you, right, when you meet them. But you could also work on conversational skills, like how how somebody feels appreciated and heard, and all these things. What's in How to Win Friends and Influence People, for example. Yeah. And so there's different sub skills within relationships, and relationships is a sub skill of confidence. And you could sort of break down and say, like, oh, actually I could improve on this area, and then you could go out and actually work on that, which I think is really great. Because a lot of people, I think some people get stuck in thinking, I'm just going to be this good at relationships, or I'm just going to be this good physically forever. Like, this is what I was born with. I'm naturally imbued with these talents and abilities, and that's pretty much what I've got. Right. But we know from Carol Dweck's work, right, the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset is that when you have a growth mindset, you believe that you can change, and that what you have now, I mean, look at how anybody listening, how you were 10 years ago and how far you've come since then. But we forget that we can progress so far. So it's good to just keep pushing yourself into, right, the growth mindset side of things. Yes. So that's a great segue actually into growth mindset, and then to how you've done that over time with the podcast, because obviously things change, right? You gather new information from different people and makes you think differently. And what's interesting too, right? You mentioned the fixed and the growth mindset. We now know that there's a lot of neuroplasticity within the brain. Like, we can change our pathways, we can change and reprogram ourselves on a very deep level. And we're learning that in TCP right now, with Jim Fortin, on how to do that through hypnosis and all sorts of different tools. So my question then would be is, referring to growth mindset, how have you been able to apply that in your own life? And then
what tools have you taken, or what tools have you taken from those that you've learned from?
Well, I like that you brought up the neuroplasticity, and I used to be a biologist, and so when you think about the brain as a biological system, it is possible to change the brain. It's people can learn and grow their whole life into their 70s, 90s, however old.
Yeah.
But this has a cost. It has, just like creating new muscle. And I'm seeing these bodybuilders behind you, to actually grow tissue, to grow muscle or neurons in your brain. There's an energetic cost, and so the body and any biological system wants to be at a low cost. So when you try to change, you're sort of pushing uphill. You've got an uphill battle. So just knowing that you're going against the sort of homeostasis is important to remember. And it's going to feel uncomfortable, right? It's going to feel like you're pushing against the resistance. And that comes up for people as kind of like wanting to quit or not motivated, or wanting to back off when you get up to that edge of challenge, wanting to come back off and feel more safe or more comfortable. And so one of the keys for me was, when I came to that realization, was training myself to really love and appreciate and feel at home when it's uncomfortable. So
yes,
in bike racing, and I'm sure you know, like this, it's the no pain, no gain sort of philosophy in weightlifting, right? You damage the muscle and it grows back.
Right.
In order to win a bike race, you have to, like, everybody's on the limit, everybody's hurting, and then you have to try to go even faster than the next guy. And so then it becomes a game of grit, of psychological perseverance, as much as it is about fitness. And so if you're comfortable in this really uncomfortable space of trying to push yourself even when you're already hurting, and the other guy wants to back off, that's what the real race is. And so it could be the same in almost anything in life, and in business or whatever. When you're okay being uncomfortable, when you're okay being off balance, or feeling like a beginner, or feeling like you don't have all the answers, when you feel okay to be in that space, that's when you can really grow quickly.
Oh, Derek, I'm soaking that in right now, man, because that was just beautiful. That was so beautiful. So for those that don't know, right, whenever you work out, you break down the muscle, and it hurts, and it can be painful depending on what's going on. The lactic acid that builds up. Where the growth takes place is through the recovery, right? It's through the nutrients that you provide yourself through the rest of the recovery. But there's got to be that point where you push yourself. And I can only imagine with cycling what that takes after, the long races. You're at the very end, and it's got to be quote unquote unbearable, right? Because it is just so painful. So there's got to be the will and the intent of that barrier and that uncomfortableness. And that's physical, right? So this also applies. I love how you mentioned it in the brain too, because I didn't realize the same thing took place in the brain, that we have to exert more effort in order to rebuild those pathways. So if you don't go past this uncomfortable barrier in this area, what can you expect? What could somebody expect?
Well, when you see, and it ties back to, right, the adventures and their ability to pick up new, maybe they need to learn how to use a new piece of equipment, or they need to learn a new language because they're in a new country or something like that. It's the difference between, staying where you are versus learning what you need to do to sort of move to the next level. And you can, I mean, a lot of people with a lot of skills, like let's take driving, for example, we get to the point where we're competent enough that we're not going to hurt people, and be able to get from point A to point B, and then we stop progressing. So most people, right, are just sort of basically skilled drivers, and we stop progressing. And that's what happens with almost everything, is that we don't feel the need to become better drivers. We don't need to learn how to, drive on ice or any of these things. So A lot of times there's not necessarily the impetus to continue improving, and because it's energetically taxing. But if there's something you really do want to improve and grow and get better at, then know that the way there is through this, just 1 or 2 or 3% harder than the day before, this continued progression. And so you can push that. You can try to go as fast as you want. Sometimes you're progressing faster than others.
Yeah.
But knowing that, but the good thing is that will get you into flow states. That progression, that is the juice of life. I'm taking on something that's a little bit more challenging than I ever have before.
Yes.
It's not too hard. If it's too hard, you'll just give up. Yep. But if it's too easy, then that's boring.
Yep. Yeah. So I love how you answered that too. So if it's something that we think that we've acquired enough skill at, if we're okay and we're cool, we're happy, whatever way we want to describe it, we're probably going to stay at a certain level and only accept a certain standard. What I've seen in the fitness world is how most people kind of view their weight. If they gain too much weight, then they'll go back and they'll fluctuate. And if it's like the AC, right? If it gets too hot, the AC will kick on, it will cool it down, and back and forth. So it's the same thing with our life and with different skills. So there's got to be a passion. There's got to be a love. There's got to be something that we see as a reward in order to move us from point A to point B then, and to get us past that uncomfortable point.
Yeah. And, sometimes I'm just thinking of, I've got 2 young kids, became a dad sort of unexpectedly. And there is a whole new set of things that I didn't necessarily, just ways of interacting with kids, ways of being, certain things that you need to do as a parent that I didn't have on my radar. It wasn't like I want to go out and acquire these skills necessarily. So sometimes you never, I guess I would say you would never know sort of when you're going to get the chance or the opportunity to relearn and grow and take on a bunch of new challenges that you actually maybe weren't in your plans or weren't in the same way. Yeah.
Man, that was so juicy. Okay. All right. So we've had a lot, man. We really have. So of the confidence that comes and there's a certain confidence that comes with competence, and then that can lead to abundance, and abundance doesn't necessarily mean what we believe it means in the sense of money. It can mean so many other things, and gifts, and just different ways that the universe shows up for us and different people show up for us. So with that and what you've learned from different people along the way, so how have you shifted in this adventure that you call life from episode 1 to episode 300 and beyond?
Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the chance to sort of reflect. It's 300 was the sort of internal milestone that I set for myself. Okay. I was like, I'm going to start and I'm going to commit to 300. Yeah. It could have been any number. I don't know why I picked 300, but there's a difference because I've given up on other projects and other businesses simply because I didn't say to myself, this is what I'm committing to. It was more like, there have been other businesses where I was like, let's try it and see how it goes. And then I was like, this isn't really working. Of course, there have been times in podcasting where I've thought like, do I really want to do this anymore? Yeah. But then you fall back on your commitments, what you have to do to be in integrity. And I didn't really tell other people like, hey guys, I'm going to do 300. It was just an internal thing.
Right.
And, so I went from, learning the skills of how to actually just do a podcast, how to press record and all those, basic technical things to how do I become a better interviewer. And then I had, after maybe 150, right, halfway through these 300, I start to feel like I'm a podcaster. That's part of my identity now. I'm not a beginner. And at that point I was already teaching other people how to do it. I had taught maybe 100 people and helped them launch their podcast, which
high five for you, by the way.
High five. Yeah. And all those other people, right, that now have podcasts. And We were doing it a lot of times. We'd do like a boot camp in my living room when I was living in Bali. We'd get like 6 people together who all wanted to start podcasts, and we'd all interview each other and work through the technical stuff in person. It was pretty fun.
It's an awesome idea.
And so as I progressed, it became part of me, I guess. I associated my identity with I'm now a podcaster, and it was this sort of self-label that I put on myself.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting to observe, going from beginner to veteran, I suppose.
So it's episode 150 that I'm going to feel like and that most people are going to feel like a podcaster. Is that what
well,
it is?
I think it probably was actually about 20 episodes, and I was like, okay, I got this.
But
then you go in waves, and you anybody that's, teenagers that think they have the world figured out, right? Yeah. I was like that. I was like 20 episodes in, I'm the best interviewer ever. I don't know why I don't have millions of listeners. This is, what everybody needs to tune in. and then you're like, oh, I see that there's actually a lot of things I could be doing better. And then you go and you do the work, and then you come back and you're like, now I'm the best. Now I've got it. And you're like, no, actually there's way more to learn. And so it's this cycle of getting cocky and feeling like you made it, and then realizing you have way more to go. And this path of mastery, there's really no finish line. Like take any skill, playing piano or a sport or something, right? You can have a standout performance, a standout season, but there's different things you want to continue developing. So that's kind of what I love about podcasting or business in general, is this fertile ground for continued exploration and improvement, and this path of seeking mastery.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you put that in there. So I had a couple, so many different little things came to mind, but the biggest one was how a tie-dye shirt was made back in the day. I remember hearing, I want to say it was in Deepak Chopra's book, The Book of Secrets. I want to say it was that one, but I could be wrong. He talked about how they dyed shirts, and you had this huge pot of dye, and you take the white cotton t-shirt and you place it in, and you let the ink soak within the cotton, and then it would dry out. And then if you wanted it to be a darker color, you'd re-dip it in the dye, and you have to do this several times until the shirt became the color that you wanted. And it's kind of the same thing that you just mentioned. You get to a certain point and you feel like you've done really well, and you go off, and then you realize, I need to go back and revisit this. And it reminds me of martial arts too. I've been taking martial arts for about a year, and at one point I think, oh man, I got this down. I can give a little slip on my master, or on my sensei. And as soon as I do it, because I know I like to push my limits a little bit, boy, he slams me down to the ground and lets me know, hey, you're still a student. There's still so much more to learn. So what a huge lesson in life that you're still, even though you are a veteran and you can consider yourself a veteran, that there's still things to be learned, and you're still open to that too. That shows who you are and the mindset that you've come to adapt and to live from moving forward too, because that's huge, And just think of how many thousands of people that you've affected too, with all the people that you've helped grow podcasts. Like you've got obviously my audience, but all those that you've affected along the way, like that's huge, man. You're a game changer. You're a life changer. So congrats for all these, and I'm just met you and telling me a small bit of your life. I can only imagine the rest of the milestones that you've had as well. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah. It feels great to have you say that. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's so cool. If I could give you a high five right now in real life, I'd give you a high five in real life, or face to face. So yeah, that's quite cool. So I'm curious and this is one of the questions that I ask everybody. So what would you define at the beginning of your journey, right? The podcast journey, what would you define excellent as? Because I'm all about reflection. And then what would you define excellence as now that you've gone through this life and everything like that, right?
So let's see, excellence at the beginning. That's in terms of podcasting excellence, I was focused on metrics probably at first. I thought a large audience was excellence, and that, whoever did what to get a large audience, there's different types of people with large audiences. I was like, okay, well, they're all excellent in their own way. And then I guess I've been more specific with the type of excellence that I want to be doing. Mm-hmm. So in particular, I focused on the craft of the conversation, of the craft of the interview. Mm-hmm. So there's probably people who are much more excellent at the promotion or the PR side of their podcast, yes, which could lead to a large following. That's also a piece of the puzzle, right? Everybody has to market what they do.
Yeah.
But where I focused was being able to deliver an interview that they couldn't get anywhere else. So learning how to steer a conversation so that, one thing that Oprah does really well is that she allows the actual experience and the emotion of that person's situation to become apparent to the viewer.
Yeah.
And so by studying all these great hosts, these great interviewers, I learned how to create that container within a conversation so that we're able to pull, and you said living vicariously, right? So, but to have that become as real as possible so people can really understand what it's like, because
yeah,
if you're not going through the experience, you really can't. But we want to get as close as possible to really understanding what it's like to go through these experiences, and that's the power of storytelling. So I focused on for a long time the craft of the interview itself, but there's also excellence in how you get an excellent guest in a conversation, right? There's a whole process of actually setting that up, and these are busy and important people that have to pick and choose which podcast they're on. So there's a skill in making the connection and making the whole situation happen. How you reach out and how you approach people and how you frame it in their best interest, or essentially, if you're coming from a place of generosity, and if you really want to help the guest, you want to share as much as possible with your audience. So coming from a place of service to the guest, even if they don't come on your show. So that's another aspect of it. And now I'm sort of just free forming, but hopefully that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And excuse me, what I'm learning here is it's much kind of like how we all start, and I say that in the sense of entrepreneurially. I would say most people that I've talked to, they want to make money, right? They're there for the metrics, the podcast. I want to have this huge famous podcast because of all the things that I think are going to come with me. Not saying that's your story, right? But I mean, I'm right along those lines too. I was, I wanted this big podcast, all this, but then I started to realize very quickly that this is an opportunity to change people's lives very quickly, right? So then that started to kind of change where the focus went, and it sounds like it was very quickly along the same lines for you too, that it wasn't necessarily about the numbers, but it was more about the impact and what you can learn and how you can share those experiences as well, which is pretty excellent in my view. So with that being said, is excellence now for you? Is it crafting, making sure that you get the interviewer and still produce a great podcast, or even in your own life, what is excellence for you now?
Well, someone said this the other day, and I got it for the first time. I'd heard it before, but the internet is full of ideas. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of competition. It's a crowded space on the internet, and to stand out, your ideas need to stand out above other ideas. Yes. And so my current priority is how, and this comes from this quote from Einstein of, a problem can't be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. So when I think about that before most of the interviews that I do, how can we move beyond, if we're talking about some problem or some solution or something, how can we take it to the next level? How can we flip conventional thinking on its head? How can we actually take this conversation outside of the box? Because a lot of my podcasts early on were exploring a box that people are operating in. And I think what's of the greatest service right now is to try as hard as we can to look at unconventional ideas, or to see the box that we're operating in and try to look at solutions from outside the box, which means whatever area the guest is ahead of their time, or wherever else, if a guest is takes a different stance than most of their field, like if it's a bodybuilder that says you should do this, and everyone's like, no, you should be lifting weights, but the bodybuilder's like, no, you should just be visualizing lifting weights or something, right? Most people are saying this and they're saying the other thing. You're zagging when everyone else is zigging.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at, because those are going to be the most valuable ideas for us to progress as a species, I think.
Yeah. So what's really leading edge? There was, man, is the book even near me? Yes. The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Livakani. I think that's, yes. Great book. He's the founder of Mind Valley. And he speaks in that book about how you want to dent the current comfort zone of the world, right? You find the people living on the edge and those that are denting that area, because they are the ones who are going to create the biggest change and the biggest impact over time. So that is really, really cool. So you're living like right with really the most updated information, being that you were a biologist and quote unquote another life, like you were really research based, and you want to make sure that, I wouldn't say that you're doing things right, but that things are updated. Would that be a good way to describe it?
Well, yeah. And what I learned so I was a virologist, interestingly enough. And in order to get to the cutting edge, you have to have enough of a foundation. You have to sort of understand the field and the context and where you are. So there's this sort of base knowledge before you actually know you're at the cutting edge.
Yeah.
When you're a beginner, you're like, everything's cutting edge because I'm just learning it. But once you've sort of understood the full aspect of where the field is, or where, entrepreneurship is, or whatever, when you can see the cutting edge, then you can take a step beyond it. So partly it's about bringing yourself up to a level where you can actually be on the cutting edge. Yeah. And then it comes down to the confidence of like, where can I push the boundary? Where can I make a dent? But I discovered that sort of for the first time. I had to spend basically 3 years studying in order to understand where I could actually make a difference when I was in academia. Wow.
That is, I think that's a very powerful lesson for people. I'm like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm taking a martial art, and my teacher, my instructor mentioned to me there's a martial art called Harimau, and it's a Filipino art, and it's, the way he describes it to me is basically like fighting yoga. It's like death yoga. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, a lot of the poses in yoga are applied in this particular art. And he shows me, man, and it's like, are you familiar with yoga?
Yep.
Okay, so like the pigeon pose, but you drop into the pigeon pose from a stand, or you jump and you fall into just, maybe one day I can show you some. But what he told me was that you needed 3 years of physical training before even learning the form and the art, because it required that much of you physically and that much flexibility that was needed. So your base would take 3 years before you even learn the first form. And I thought about that. I was like, what commitment do you have to develop? What consistency? What type of mindset do you have to develop over 3 years in order to just even be considered to learn this particular art? So let our listeners know that sometimes results don't come right away, and it takes actually forming a foundation to get to a certain level in order to understand that subject or that matter even on a greater level. Like piano, you have to have a foundation of piano first, and then you can really discover what it's like to play the greater pieces of art that are out there, and then create your own art too. Wow, that's pretty powerful. So where do you see yourself now, and where do you see yourself going?
Well, partly, um, I'm in a place of, because the world is changing so fast, right? I want to be of support to sort of the greatest good to people, and be flexible and adaptive as well. And so I've created this platform. I've now been doing it for years, and I can pick and choose and bring on these cutting edge guests and share the ideas. And exactly sort of the ultimate use of that, or the highest use of that, I think will be something that becomes apparent.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's sort of an inner knowing. It's like trusting that I'm on the right path because it feels like the right way to go, without necessarily knowing exactly what the end looks like.
And has that taken time to get to that place? Because this is exciting to get into this place, because there's many people that I speak with, many clients, they want to have that inner knowing that I know that I'm doing the right thing, that I know that I'm doing this. Or so is that something that you've developed, or how have you grown to kind of get this? Is it the abundance and the confidence that you talked about, or could you dive a bit deeper for us?
Well, I've started, I don't know, a dozen different businesses or different aspects of business, and you can tell how you feel in each of those. Like some of them, it's really easy to get going, and sometimes there's aspects that you really love, but there's other parts that you don't really like, and so you can compare the, like, what feels like a hell yes, like what feels like my body feels alive when I'm doing this, versus I'm doing this for money, or it's like easy for me to make money, but I don't feel fully alive. And so being able to distinguish between, how to choose, like, yes, this is really what I need to be doing. If I take money or other sort of preconceived notions off the table, and a lot of entrepreneurs, they're able to make it through the tough challenges because they just get on one sense that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And they're committed to the idea beyond the actual struggles that it takes.
Yeah.
And so that discernment of your own experience of, like, what feels good to continue doing, and what you can actually turn off and move away from, even though you were successful at it, but you didn't feel fully alive doing it. That's
very, very important. I'm currently reading a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, and it's all about, it's really, really good. It's all about Stoic philosophy. And that's one of the things that the Stoics were very big on, was reflection and being able to determine, what is going to make the biggest impact on others, what's going to make the biggest impact on myself, and how does this relate to my inner state. And so many of us choose things that we feel okay, like 50% of the time, but we don't necessarily see that there's an option to pursue something that makes us feel alive 100% of the time. So you've learned that there are things that give you 100%, 50%, 30%, different levels of satisfaction. And you've also been able to walk away from things that don't give you as much satisfaction as you would desire. Is that correct?
Yeah. And actually, this is kind of interesting, because I applied that approach to my training this year. I said, I'm only gonna, whereas before I would have followed a training plan. I would have said, here's what I need to do to be at race level fitness. Here's the workouts, here's the recovery, whatever.
Right.
And I sort of put that aside and said, I'm only going to train when it feels amazing. And so if I found myself heading out and I was like, I really just don't want to be doing this, one of the questions I would say, well, is there a way that you could create this, this experience of training that would actually be exciting? Maybe it's going to a new place, or doing it with a friend or something like that. So can I just change the situation so that I am excited about it, that I really do want to do it?
Yeah.
And if not, if I'm still forcing myself to do something and I'm just not going to enjoy it, then I may pull the plug. And so I think it's worth noting that a champion doesn't always want to train hard, right? They're not always going to feel like it.
Yeah.
But so I was just kind of playing with, so I've been there. I've been that person that trained hard no matter how I was feeling.
Right.
I saw the outcome. And then this year I'm sort of playing with, can I love every time I'm training? And can I sort of weave that in here? And so coming up with different ways that I'm always going to be enjoying what I'm doing. And if not, just don't worry about it. Just don't do it. And ultimately that led to, I won the state championship this year. And
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And so it ended up paying off, and I felt pretty good about it.
So I'm curious, from a fitness trainer standpoint, what did your training end up looking like? Was it 1 time a week, 2 times a week? I mean, obviously when you were excited, you felt like it, but what did that end up looking like? Yeah,
it was about, so I would say normally, ideally, right, you're doing like 12 to 16 hours a week. I was probably doing 5 to 8 hours a week. So half the volume, maybe 4 to 5 days a week training. Nice. And then probably 4 days a week we're riding pretty hard. So it was just hard riding and recovery. So not a lot of recovery, just going out and riding easy. Yeah. And a lot of times I was pulling my kids in the trailer. So because I was doing double duty of parenting. And so they're, an extra 85 pounds together with the trailer on the back of the bike. So I'm just finding these short little steep hills, and I'm just doing reps, pulling them up and down with the trailer. So normally my training would be for a long race. I'd be going out and doing 30-minute intervals, right, 15-minute intervals. But here I was doing, 2-minute intervals over and over and over and over and over and over again with the kids in the trailer.
Wow. What a testament to training smarter too, because if you have, you said 85 pounds going behind you, you got some of the resistance training going there too. And I'm starting to learn how much intention really does play a role, right? You mentioned in one of your podcasts, I recently just listened to it, but the double slit experiment in physics, and how the observer and the expectation of the observer actually affects what's being observed. So the thoughts and the mind of the performer obviously are going to affect how the performer performs. So that's pretty legit, dude. That's half the volume time and quite a performance too, like got the championship. So would you in the future prefer this way of training, or would you go back to,
If I had it, I tried it one way, right? I tried the way where you devote your whole life to it as a professional. And that's really hard because you're just so exhausted all the time. Oh my gosh, you're right on the edge, right? A really good athlete is right on the edge of unhealthiness.
Yep.
Because they're pushing their body to be more fit, but if they push too far, then you can go into sickness or overtraining or something.
Been there.
So it's like it doesn't actually feel that great.
Nope.
But having the chance, it's if you've never had this experience, I'll tell you, it's a dream trying to become a pro athlete, because
really?
you clear your schedule, you work out, you play all day, you eat as much as you want. When I was doing that, it was such a fun time because you give yourself permission to go and ride your bike for 6 hours a day, and your goal is to race, to play a game, to do it. It's really fun to do it that way. Yeah. And I'm glad I had the chance to do it like that. Yeah.
That's what's up, man. Okay. Yeah. So I understand that very much. Although cycling and bodybuilding are a bit different from each other, it's being able to eat as much food as you do, and you love what you're doing, and you push yourself. You do realize after a time how much of a toll that you're putting on your body, and how it can take away. I noticed that it could take away from different areas of life as well if I let it. So That had to be a hell of an experience, going to be pro. And were you doing the podcast during this time too?
This was before the podcast. This was sort of career number one was cycling, then the science, then the podcasting.
Then the podcast. Wow, man, you like becoming the modern day Renaissance man too. You got biology and you got the science, and then now you're exploring and really the adventure. Well, now it's shifting into the Derek Loudermilk show. So I don't want to take too much of your time. So I have a few questions after this initial one, and then we can end it here. I'm really enjoying the conversation, but I want to.
Yeah, me too.
I want to value our time. Okay, so the Art of Adventure, now it's going into the Derek Loudermilk show. I remember you saying in one of the podcasts that you're focusing a lot on interviews now, and so where do you see the show headed, and where do you see yourself going as well?
Well, the other focus that I have is, I helped a lot of people start podcasts. I've helped almost 100 people become best-selling authors. I put together a collaborative group project, and I'm really one of my coaching focuses is helping. I've come up with this system called the LEAP system for quantum entrepreneurship. So Quantum Leap, but it's basically training 4 different aspects of sort of a thought leader, and a thought leader as in somebody who's on the cutting edge of their field, right? Somebody who's pushing the boundaries, making a dent in the world. How do we disseminate their ideas? How do we actually optimize their influence? Mm-hmm. And so whether these people are authors or creating courses or doing seminars or retreats or coaches or anything like that. Yeah. So I'm teaching them both the business systems, which we call the Thought Leaders MBA. Okay. I'm teaching them to think like an adventurer, distilling down all that stuff from what we started talking about with the confidence and all these pieces, how to think like an adventurer, how to be a top performer, like pro athletes. How do you really become the best in the world at what you're doing?
Yeah.
And then, bringing in spirituality, quantum physics, metaphysics to really understand, because you have to understand, right? We talked about the double slit experiment, quantum entanglement. Yep. Nothing you do is in a vacuum. It's connected with all these other aspects. Yep. So we've talked about how it feels to do something. We've talked about the impact, you get out what you put in to the universe. There's all these different things. And so when you're doing work that you're in alignment with, and you have all the other pieces of the puzzle, then you're just going to take off. Yep. So that's what I really enjoy doing is training thought leaders and entrepreneurs who are on the cutting edge with their work.
And that's amazing. You're hitting every aspect. I mean, you're hitting mind, body, spirit. You're hitting mind, body, energy, depending on the words that you want to use, because physically, if you're teaching them how to take care of themselves as a pro athlete, you're hitting sleep, you're hitting food at one point or another, how important it is to take care of this body that we're gifted with. Then there's the adventure side, which is the growth mindset, a lot of what we covered here today. And having that curiosity, I realize how important curiosity is in life too, to really just kind of take life as in the mind of a child, no fear. And you explore different things and you learn what those actions are and the consequences or the repercussions of those actions. And then the biggest, which I'm new to, is the metaphysics and the quantum and the maybe, for lack of better words, the woo-woo, but it's not really woo-woo. It's actually, it's science. This is very much real, and how important that is. And this is one thing that we said we were going to hit a little bit, the subconscious mind and the identity. So you're really working on helping these people shift their identity. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah. And I think probably what would be new for the listener is a lot of times you can shift your identity on a subconscious level. Yep. And you can get information from your subconscious. You can get support. You can get ideas. And so one thing that we often do that I do with my clients and teach them is how to take advantage of dream time. And so dream time is basically you sort of put the ego aside. You have this direct connection with the subconscious mind. And so asking for solutions to a business problem, asking for insight or guidance, or even saying like, I want $100,000, subconscious, like, tell me how to do it. Using that connection that people have and training the ability to really understand what's going on in dream time. When is the subconscious mind just sort of like cleaning up experiences from the day, and when is it giving you powerful insight? When is it really guiding you in a direction of what you can do in your life? Just one great example was this house. This is a house we bought exactly a year ago, and we had looked at like 30 houses, and I was like, I don't know, they're all kind of not suitable enough. And we got to this one, and I was like, this is pretty good. But my wife said, this is it. This is the house. I know it. And I was like, I don't know. The kitchen is a little small. So I asked in Dreamtime, I was like, can you tell me for sure, is this the house that we're supposed to buy?
Yeah.
And I got this just big, booming, loud voice like, yes, this is your house. I was like, oh my gosh. And it was like, are you sure? Like, I had some little niggling doubts, because like trusting a disembodied booming voice of God or whatever in your dreams, like, I don't know, how can you trust it? And I was like, so then I asked again, I was like, can you confirm? Can you tell me in a different way? And I got this whole elaborate sequence of like, I'm looking in the fireplace of my house and, lighting the fire and everything. And I'm like, okay. I interpreted that of like another yes. So we said, yes, we bought this house. It ended up being a great deal and all kinds of things. So many good things that we couldn't have predicted came from it. But learning to access and then trust that your subconscious knows way more than the conscious mind, and being able to access that, whether it's for business ideas or for your own direction in life, has been really powerful, both for myself and for my clients.
Oh, that is huge, bro. That is huge. Oh, and the trust is the big piece too, right? Like the trust is that like, well, are you sure about this? Are you really sure? And it's like, yes. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, you're asking me to take that leap or that step, whatever it is. But you do it, and then you find out that this is exactly what you needed the whole time, and you didn't even know it at the time, So, man, that is huge. So you're making really big shifts with people. You're changing people's lives, their perspectives, and you're helping them really dive deep into. I think the biggest thing that we can do here is develop our relationship with ourselves and with Source, and so you're helping people develop their relationship with Source and themselves through their subconscious mind. That's what it sounds like. And then that's huge, man. Like, that's huge.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, like, we're getting into the realm of woo woo. And because I was a scientist, and I used to get annoyed at people when they would say it's energy, it's whatever, but they wouldn't define it, or all these terms in the woo woo seem very mushy and nebulous. And I couldn't understand them. And, you might say, you don't need to understand them. It's just the way it is. But I'm the kind of person that kind of likes to understand things, so I can sort of teach it, explain it to others. So where I'm coming from is I would like to understand how the fundamental nature of the universe works in relationship to our own consciousness, so that we can take advantage of it and have the best experience we can. So it's a applied consciousness. How can we apply consciousness and consciousness related technology to everything we're doing in our lives, in our business, in trying to change the world, all these things, knowing that they're all connected.
Yeah. That is so good, man. That is so good. It reminds me almost of like Buddhist philosophy, in the sense of just being mindful, like being mindful and having that intention there. And I know it's a bit more than that, and we can have like a whole nother hour and a half, 2 hour conversation on it too. Cause it's so intricate. And it's so intimate at the same time. Those are two really good words. It's intricate and it's intimate, because you really have to open yourself and be vulnerable with yourself in order to say, this is what I want, I believe, I trust, and I'm going to hold that intention until it manifests, and I'm going to become the person that I need to be in order to do the things to do to get it done. And that goes all the way back to taking that effort and creating those new neural pathways.
And I think sort of globally right now, where people are being forced to trust that it's going to work out. Like there's a lot of unknowns for a lot of people, and it's sort of, you don't have a choice but to trust that things are going to be okay. And if you don't trust, then it's hard, right? And you're uncomfortable and you're sad or afraid or any of these things. So it's kind of like saying you just have to keep coming back to trust and be at peace, even though all the shit's hitting the fan,
It reminds me of the meme. I want to say it's a little dog who's sitting in like a restaurant type room and everything's on fire, and they have the little bubble caption above the head of the dog, and it said, "This is fine." And you just have to keep letting yourself, hey, cool, everything's working out to my highest good. This is fine. This is great. So with that, I have two major questions. This is what I try to ask everybody on the podcast. The first one is, what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world, and what advice should they ignore? So what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world, and what advice should they ignore?
Advice-wise, I would say become an experimentalist. Test things out. Create a question that you want to test. Like, is this the right career, or is this the right relationship, or what do I really want to do? And then to answer that, well, a lot of times you have to go and have a direct experience. There's no way you can answer it without just going and having an experience. So start with a question, and if you don't get the answer you expected, that's okay too. But treating things like, I'm going to make a little experiment here, make a little bet that I do think this is the right way to go, but I'm open to changing given new information. So thinking like an experimentalist will be really helpful. Yeah. And then what advice to ignore? I think the one thing that I have to disentangle a lot of people from a lot of the clients that I coach is their motivation behind doing things, whether it's an invisible script they have running because they expected that they should do it a certain way, or whether they think they have to make money. A lot of times it's disentangling what they're doing with the expectations that they have to do it this one way.
Yep.
So just be aware of the invisible scripts that may be running your decision making.
Yeah, I very much like those two. I very much like, especially, what should they ignore, because I've been caught in that trap, and I can imagine most entrepreneurs have been in that trap before, where most people think that they have to do something, but they don't really have to do it, or they should, but they don't really. You may not be doing it for the right reasons, or the reasons that are aligned with you. So those are really good. Thank you. Yeah. This is the big one. So this is where I've gotten the title for most of my podcast interviews. All right. So,
okay.
All right. So if you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, getting a message out to millions or billions, what would it say and why? It can be a few words. It can be a paragraph, somebody else's quote, anything that you want it to be.
Gosh, I just had this image of from Braveheart, where what's now I'm blanking on his name. The character
is it Walt?
William Wallace. Where William Wallace is talking. He's talking to the noblemen of the Scottish, and he's like, You're scrabbling over scraps from Longshank's table, and you've missed your God-given right to something better.
Oh, that's a good one.
And the point is that we're focused on these little things, that we're focused on trying to take a little piece of something in a box when we have this like infinite possibilities of who we can be in front of us.
Ooh, that is good.
So that's the sentiment there.
Yeah.
Around this billboard.
That is, I like that. And I can even see the billboard. You know, you have him speaking in front of, I'm not gonna lie, man, don't tell me that I can't not put on this interview because I haven't seen Braveheart. But but I can imagine, I know Mel Gibson's face and what he looked like and seeing that quote, and I can imagine that affecting millions of people, because when we realize like, hey, you don't really need to be focused on this, you know, or what would it be like, maybe a better question is, what would it be like to focus on something different? You know, that is huge. That is huge. You are where your attention is, right? So is there anything that I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you, or is there anything that you'd like to say that I didn't have a chance to maybe get out?
No, this was fun. And there's a Mark Twain quote that says, how will I know what I think until I see what I say? And so I appreciate your questions, because I was able to maybe articulate some of these things for the first time, or more clearly for myself. So that was super helpful. Appreciate the way you guided things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's one of the things that I want to get is I want to have that unique interview, and I want to develop a very intimate connection quickly with my interviewer so that they feel comfortable opening up and reflecting, because it's like you said, we learn from stories and we learn from reflection. So if there are lessons that I know I learned, I'm going to listen to this 2 or 3 more times, because I learned so much from you, dude. And I know that my listeners will too. And I hope that, you know, you got some good information and value and some aha moments from yourself as well. So with that being said, I would love it if you took a second, you let us know where we can get more information about you, what you do. If you want to plug anything, please feel free.
Yeah, so DerekLoudermilk.com and the Derek Loudermilk Show are the website and the podcast. And if you identify as, you know, a coach or an author or a course creator, which I sort of label as a thought leader, and you're working towards growing the business or growing your influence and those side of things, those are the type of people I work with. So feel free to connect with me about that. And yeah, just Eric, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed connecting with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Y'all be sure to check out Derek's website and his podcast. I had a chance to listen, and you have, because you're still here, you have the most interesting guest. And I was just listening to a guy, Alex, I think his name was, or maybe it was Alexa. I feel bad for not remembering, but he talked about the commitment that he had in order to interview Warren Buffett, Jay-Z. He interviewed Bill Gates, and y'all take what you've learned from this particular interview, go listen to Derek's podcast and learn even more, because you do a really good job of getting those emotions from your guest and allowing the audience listener, you know, me, to experience what they experienced. So keep doing what you're doing, bro. I'm glad that we had a chance to connect, and you're unstoppable. So
thank you.
Have a great day. Say again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
And I think that's about it. So y'all tune in, and we will talk soon. Have a great day, Derek. Thank you for being here. And that's
Stay
it.
adventurous.
Stay adventurous. Go check out the Derek Loudermilk Show. Talk to y'all later. Peace.